When I went to bed at the night of October 6th, 2023, at that point I thought I know everything that there is to know about left and about antisemitism. I spent half of my adult life being a leftist and quite honestly being an anti-Semite. And then I spent the second half of my adult life criticizing the left and criticizing anti-Semitism. So I thought I had seen it all. And then next morning, October 7 happens. And then for the next days, weeks, and actually for the next 2 years, what I saw, the reaction that I've seen from the left to the worst pogrom from the time of the Holocaust even shook me, and I thought I'm a cynic. So let's try to recapture a bit what happened. We saw in live streaming the butchering of innocent people, the terrorizing of women, the kidnapping of babies. And what was the reaction of the left? There were two kinds of reactions. The more unhinged ones, or maybe the less diplomatic and clever ones, took immediately to the streets to celebrate. If you remember, there were protests on October 8th in major Western capitals. On October 8th, there was not a single Israeli soldier in Gaza. There was no quote-unquote genocide. And yet there were celebrations. But there was a second reaction. It was the more diplomatic ones, mostly like the university professors. And their reaction was, let's not rush into judgment. It's complicated. That yeah, innocents were executed, women were abducted. Already we heard rumors about sexual violence. Now notice that these were the people who would rush into judgment all the previous years with the slightest suspicion. So if, for example, the board of a company didn't have an equal number of women, they would say this is sexism. But then abducting and terrorizing women, that was resistance, not sexism. These were the people who rightly supported, supposedly, the rights of LGBT people in the Western world. And that's indeed important. And yet, they sided with regimes that terrorize LGBT people, or even worse, they throw them from buildings. These are the people who were giving us lectures about racism. They thought that everything is racism. And yet they had no problem marching side by side with overt anti-Semites. And in the months that followed, it became even worse. What actually happened was that the left was the conveyor belt for the propaganda of the worst backward jihadis to the West. The left was the culprit in bringing back the worst anti-Semitic conspiracies. They were actually the culprit in bringing back the protocols of the elders of Zion of our time, which is the idea that Israel is committing genocide to Gaza. The PR army of the worst people in the Middle East is the left in the West.
Don't forget Tucker Carlson and Candy.
I don't, but the topic today is the left. But you can bring it in the Q&A. And in my mind, there are two moments that stand as example. Now, I say that I care about innocent Palestinians more than basically all the leftists combined. Here are two examples. Do you remember, actually it's the anniversaries today. Do you remember what happened when Yahya Sinwar was killed by the Israelis a year ago from today? Among many leftists, Sinwar was lionized as a resistant figure. And my question to them is, how can you say that you care about the Palestinians and lionize Sinwar? Do you know what was the nickname of Sinwar? The Butcher of Khan Yunis. Do you know that he got this nickname not for killing Jews? He got this nickname for terrorizing Palestinian dissidents. So you are telling me that you care about innocent Palestinians and yet you lionize their worst terrorizer. And let me give you a second example. Last week, there was a deal on the table. You might consider it good, bad, but there was a deal on the table that would finish the war. And it would liberate the Palestinians from Hamas. And down the road, there was the prospect that maybe they will also going to have something like a state. What was the reaction by radical leftists to this deal? These are the people, remember, who are telling us for 2 years that what happens is a genocide. And here is a deal on the table that would liberate Palestinians from Hamas. And what was the reaction of the left? They rejected it. One of the biggest celebrities of the left in the Western world, a guy who is also Greek, a guy called Varoufakis, he explicitly said the Palestinians should reject the deal. Translation, the Palestinians should keep dying. So not only they hate Israel, they hate also the innocent people in Palestine. people view this and they ask themselves, what happened? When did the left become like that? And you know, ladies and gentlemen, the answer is the left was always like that. It's just that we were not paying much attention. Throughout the history of the 50s, of the 60s, the 70s, till today, the left was on the side every time of the enemies of Israel. And it was on the side of the enemies of Israel in two crucial ways. The first was it gave them material support. Who was the biggest sponsor of the Arabs in every war after 56 that the Arabs launched against Israel? These wars were launched with Soviet tanks, with sometimes there were actually Soviet pilots participating in these wars. Now, notice again the unimaginable hypocrisy here. Some of these regimes that were fighting Israel were terrorizing their workers, and they were terrorizing actually leftists in this country. Leftists in Egypt were perishing in torture chambers. And yet the Soviet Union had no problem to provide ammunition to the regimes that terrorized communists. So they hated Israel more than they loved their own comrades. But the left provided an even more important support to the enemies of Israel. And this was not the material support, this was the intellectual support. Who built the myth that Arab terrorists were actually freedom fighters? It was the global propaganda mechanism of the left. Who built the profile of Arafat as a national liberation leader? The guy who is the reason Palestinians don't have a state today. Who portrayed him as a popular icon? It was the left. Every time that the Arabs and the Palestinians would perpetrate an atrocity, who would whitewash them in the court of public opinion? It was again the left. Because October 7th was not the first time that we saw unimaginable atrocities against Jews. Do you remember the attack in the Olympic Games in Munich with Israeli athletes being, I don't want to become graphic, being tortured to death? Do you remember the Malot school massacre, where people who call themselves the Popular Front, so leftists, were executing school kids at point blank? A few months after that massacre, Arafat was proudly in the United Nations receiving standing ovation. Do you remember, many of you are young enough, Palestinian terrorists shooting and throwing to the sea a disabled person in what was that name of that cruise? Again, yes, they could get away with everything because they had a whole army of PR people to whitewash them, and these were the leftists. So this is the history of the hatred of left with Israel. But the big question is, because this is not a history lesson, the big question is why? Why is it that people who supposedly are progressive side with forces that are the opposite from anything that resembles progress? And I would like your contributions on this in the Q&A, but I have a suspicion that it's a combination of two reasons. For the worst of the people in the left, I think it is simply, how to call it, envy, hatred. Because Israel is a symbol for everything that they hate. Here is a country that rises, here is a group of persecuted people, supposedly they're in favor of the persecuted, right? And yet here you have, in the beginning and the middle of the 20th century, people, persecuted people, going to the middle of the desert and creating something and building a city from nothing. Here you have the rents of the earth doing something with their lives, showing that it is possible against all odds. Here you have survivors of the Holocaust with fresh in their hand a tattoo from the concentration camp, fighting an independence war against how many nations and winning it and creating a civilized, mostly right-respecting society. And apparently, if you have hatred in your heart, and if your idea is that, no one can achieve anything if they are weak, or the exploited never have a chance. Israel is a live refutation of every bromide of the leftists. So for many leftists, Israel is kind of this mirror that puts in front of them that, no, your ideas, your hatred, and your vision of human beings as not being able to overcome, it's completely crushed. Here you have the most traumatized people of the 20th century building a great country. And the left cannot stand this. But I don't want to give bad motives to all leftists. So I'm sure there are many well-meaning people. And this is the even most difficult question. Why do these maybe well-meaning people hate Israel? Sometimes these people don't know anything about the history of the region. They know, though, one thing. And one thing only. Like, you show them a map, they cannot tell you where Lebanon and Israel and Syria is. But they know one thing. They know that Israel is stronger and Palestinians are weaker. And for them, this is enough to draw their judgment. And their judgment is, I'm always with the weaker side. And you know, there is something appealing to it. With my partner, whenever we watch sports, who do we always support? We support the weaker side, right? There's something nice to it. We're going to Dallas tomorrow. It was so cool when the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA title when they were outsiders in 2011. So I understand that why you want to side with the underdog. But this does not mean that the underdog is always right. I mean, the Japanese were the underdogs towards the end of the Second World War. What does this mean? We should side with Imperial Japan when they were slaughtering all this population in Asia? The mafia is an underdog, if you think about it. The mafia is facing the organized force of the state. They are the underdogs. ISIS was an underdog. At some point, ISIS was facing Russia, the United States, Syria, Hezbollah. They were an underdog. Does this mean we should support the underdog? And yet, apparently, there's something very powerful in this idea that the strong should sacrifice to the weak. I mean, we've heard it in our churches, we've heard it from our parents. But is this a good idea? Let's see how this idea translates, first of all, to your own lives. Should you, no question asked, sacrifice to people who are weaker? How would your life look if you did that? So you wake up tomorrow and you say, today, I'm not going to do anything that I like. Like, I love this woman, but there are 100 other women who, I don't know, need love, so sorry, bye. This makes no sense for your life. Why does it make sense in how you view foreign policy, for example? And let's be specific. How does this play out in the Israel-Hamas conflict? This idea that, again, the underdog deserves all the time our support. So Hamas turns to Israel and says, look, we want to destroy you, and we're trying to destroy you. But as you are fighting back against us, there are people here who are suffering. And these people are weak. Therefore, what you have to do is either help us to destroy you, or at least don't resist. Because if you try to fight back, innocents will suffer. And notice how Israel is buying into this. We had, for the first time in history, I've never seen something like that, a war where the one side is trying at the same time to destroy a force that openly has declared that we want to eradicate you from the face of the earth, and at the same time feed the population of that force. So people were asking, why did this war last for 2 years? Because Israel was trying something impossible. It was trying to fight, to destroy an enemy, and at the same time to save this enemy from their leadership or from their bad self. This cannot happen. And yet somehow Israel this time won. But how often can this happen? What will happen next time when Israel is attacked? And all this public opinion in the West will tell it, you need to sit down and take it. You are the stronger, and therefore you need to fight in equal terms. You know the anti-missile system that Israel has, right? The Iron Dome. Do you know how many articles I've read from serious, supposedly people saying Iron Dome is unfair? It's unfair because Hezbollah has some crappy rockets, but Israel has powerful rockets. So therefore, this is not a fair fight. Do we understand what they're actually asking Israel to do? They're asking Israel to commit suicide. And I will leave you with this, because I've told you my opinion about the left in Israel. But I think the best way to judge a movement is to see what will happen if it has its way. So I will run this thought experiment for 1 minute, and I will leave you with this. What will happen to Israel if left has its way? So left demands from Israel, don't fight back decisively, and also give the Palestinians a state, no questions asked. No questions asked. And of course, they should have free elections and all that stuff. Let's say they give the Palestinians free election. They get Gaza and they get West Bank. And we have free elections. Who is going to win in these free elections? Hamas won the last one, and any opinion poll I've seen says that this time they would win even more overwhelmingly also in the West Bank. So you have Gaza and the West Bank in the hands of Hamas. What do the leftists want? Full sovereignty for the Palestinians. A proper state. No international overseeing, nothing. What would a sovereign Hamas state do? The first thing they would do is they would go to Iran and they say, okay, come here, Revolutionary Guards. Come here, Hezbollah. Let's put all our missiles pointing towards Tel Aviv. They're a free state. They should do whatever they want. Do we realize what this means? Have you seen in the map how small Israel is? So what this tells me is, if the left has its way, the next major tragedy for Israel is not going to be another October 7. If the left has its way, and if Israel accepts its role as this sacrificial animal, the next disaster Israel will face will look more something like another Holocaust rather than something like another October 7. Thank you.